Good evening and welcome to our UK Crime Book Club. It's always a tongue twister. Author chat with Glen Salter, who writes with Simon Fairfax.
Good
Hello,
evening.
Glen.
Good evening. Thank you very much for inviting me along to have a chat.
How are you doing?
Yeah, very well indeed. Thank you. Very well indeed. Sort of dull, rainy day, but apart from that, we're okay.
Can we start off with just an introduction to your books for anybody who hasn't read them?
Yeah, of course. Up
Thank
to
you.
date, I've written my Deal series, which is historical metafiction. It's the same hero running through each book. They're set against the world of commercial property, and it's the same hero running all the way through. And he ages, unlike James Bond, as I say in the promo. And the first one starts in the 80s. And then it's 1991, 94, 95, and the last one is 99, 2000, which is this one, which is a deal on ice. There, sort of get into the camera. And thank you. And they're all set in, they transcend continents and countries. And the first one's London and Italy, and then the second one is London, South America, and the Falklands. Third one is Deauville, London, and Florida, and the fourth one is London and Russia. And then the final book, that's going to be a 5-book series. And I gave the 5th book a rest. It's still in my head, but I haven't actually written it yet. And so I wanted to give it a rest because I'd had another book that was banging a hole in my head for 2 years. And I knew I had to write it. So I gave that one a rest so as not to get stale. And this one is a complete departure. Well, it's still sort of crime, but set in that period, which is there. And that's going to be another 5-book series set in the medieval times, 1410, the first one, called A Knight and a Spy, 1410. And there'll be 4 more books after that. So it'll be the same title in 1411, 1412, blah, 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 to 1415. Yeah, so that's what I'm doing to date.
So you've been busy.
Yeah, I've been busy, and I've got another book series in my head, which I'm plotting as I'm writing that one, which is a completely different one as well. But it's a lot of fun.
We've just had a little message from Caroline saying hi, Sam and Glen. Hi, Kaz.
Hello,
That's
hello,
Caroline
Caroline. Hello.
Maston.
Yeah. Hello, Caroline.
So
Good evening.
one of my first questions
Go on.
is about the Rupert Brett Deal books. And
Yes.
so obviously we'll get on to 1410 a bit later and you can give us a bit more of a clue about what kind of thing's going to be happening in it. But I'm
Okay.
just wondering, when you go back to writing in the 90s, obviously it's interwoven with facts, things that really happened. But were there any problems, making sure of details and accuracy and things?
Yeah, I'm very lucky because I do lots of research. In fact, all my books are based around research. I probably research for the early ones about 3 months before I write a word.
Wow.
So the first one is set in the 80s in London, which is where I was at the time, although I stress it's not autobiographical. In fact, everyone I write about is, in fact, one of my anti-heroes in it thinks it's hilarious. I've changed his name, but I actually shared an office with this guy, and he's a fabulous character to write. And he actually showed the book to his wife and said, "This is what I used to be like." But when I do the research, I was really lucky because part of it involves a Purdy shotgun. And I wrote to the managing director of Purdy's and I said, "Look, I'm doing this book, blah, 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 blah." And he said, "Yeah, come on into the shop." And I wanted to know what the price of a Purdy was back in 1984. So he took me around the shop and then downstairs, and they have this lovely green ledger. And handwritten in there are all the notes of every single gun sold. And he said, "Yes, what you want is so and so." And he brought it up and he said, "Yeah, £19,425 and 16p, plus the VAT, plus the kit will be £25,000. So I had it all accurately set out, which is really lovely. But it's things like you have to try and remember and check when mobile phones came in, what you could do with them, how many people had them, do they work in a car? Because you can't have someone texting in 1980 something because it didn't exist. And you have to be very careful with that sort of thing. And people were still dashing out to phone boxes to make calls with putting money in the slot then, rather than saying, "Oh yeah, I'll get on the phone," because they couldn't, because it didn't work. So you were still jumping into there. So I had that scene where you could do that. And we all had fax machines. There was no email, which is what I quite liked, actually. So one person read it, said, "What do you mean turned off the fax machines?" And I said, "Well, every office would have about 10 of them." And they said, "Really?" I said, "Yeah, they're going in and out like this." And they couldn't believe that because they were about 25 or something. And they said, "Really? That's it?" I said, "Yeah, that's what it was." And so you have to make sure all those details are right.
Yeah, of course. I do remember going to the phone box myself as a kid.
There you
Wasn't
go.
allowed
As
to
a
use the
kid. Now
landline
that
very
makes me feel
often. That was
old.
we weren't allowed to use the landline except I believe on a Sunday back then. It
You
was a
always
while
used to.
ago for me as well. So
Well, that's all right. I used to dash out. You always want to know what your parents is, and so you go to the corner phone box to talk to your girlfriend on the corner because you didn't want your parents to hear on the landline in the house. I remember those days as well. So it's quite interesting, really.
I dread to think what you got up to.
Oh yes, don't go there.
We won't go there. Absolutely not. So I believe you visited a lot, if not all, of the places that you've written about. Have you ever lived in any of them, or has it been visiting for research purposes?
No, I've lived in. First of all, I'll answer the first part of your question. Yeah, every place I write about, pretty much I've visited.
Mm.
As one of my favorite authors, he wrote at the back of his synopsis at the end, and he said that if I write about a creek or a mountain or a tree or whatever, it's because I've been there and I can describe it perfectly. And I love the way this author writes. And I thought, if I'm going to be hopefully as good as him, I'd love to be as good as him. I ought to do the same. So every country I write about, I've been to. Every place I describe. So the places in Italy, or the border crossing between Chile and Argentina, or the Falklands, and what the impressions are, because you can only get so much from Google
Yeah.
or Wikipedia, and you can see some of the scenes. But for me, and it's a great excuse to travel the world and get tax breaks on it. So yeah, I've been to everywhere I write about, pretty much. And yes, we did actually live in Italy for 3.5 years, which helped formulate the story in my first book, because I wanted to know the places intimately, but also the systems that were in place from a legal point of view and police procedure, because one of our great friends over there is a police inspector. And he helped me a lot with what I was doing, which was pretty on the edge, some of the stuff, because I also do everything that Rupert does. I try and do myself, which we might get onto later on. And so I
That is
try
one
and,
of my questions
yeah,
for you.
okay, that's fine. Yeah, you carry on. So yeah, I have lived in Italy, and I've lived. We visited all the other places for periods of time and that kind of thing. So it's yeah, everything I write about, I've been there.
I've got a comment from it just says Facebook user, so thank you for your comments. It's not coming up with a name. I worked in a lawyer's, yes, a fax machine, but also a telex machine.
Yeah,
Now
we
that's
didn't
a
really
new
use
one
it.
for me. I do not know what a
No,
telex machine is.
I know what a telex machine is, and we only ever used a telex machine if we were doing international deals, because it was that much quicker, and the telex would come in.
Ah,
But
okay.
we just used to use the fax machine because we literally, if you're trying to get an introduction on a deal, you would literally scribble a handwritten note. I mean, literally, it was just address, price, bang, and you bang it in. She was like trading on the stock floor, and you wouldn't even get it to type, because by the time you typed it, because you couldn't type it yourself, because you had to give it to a secretary to do it, and she'd be in the link, and so it would take half an hour. Half an hour in my world was a lifetime. And
Yeah.
so you just address and slam it down the hook, press the button, and whiz, it would go off, and hopefully your deal would get in, and you'd get the introduction, and you'd work from there. So yeah, I do know what telex machines are for, but we didn't actually use it because it was too difficult. It wasn't fast enough. It's all international stuff, really.
We've got a question from Caroline Maston, who's one of our admins.
Go on.
Intrigued about the historical novel, how much research did you have to do for it? So for 1410,
Yeah,
was it a lot more
I did
research than
more
usual?
research. Yes, I did more research for that novel than any other. The Russian novel took me 7 months to do. The 1410 took me a year to start researching,
Wow.
because it's going to sound really strange, but every time you go and write some direct speech, so you might say, hi chaps, we're going down the shops today, or whatever, you'd have to translate that in. You knew exactly what you wanted to say, but you then had to translate that back to the speech. So, and there's this balance between sounding like Chaucer, which no one understands, and then on the other hand, having modern speech like, hi, how's it going? In fact, you're going down the shops, which they never say like that. So you have to try and put it in that frame. And every word I used, for example, beneficial, I wanted to use beneficial in a sentence, and I thought, did they have beneficial in 1410? So I'd then Google it and see when the origin of the word came, and I'd allow myself 16th century, but anything more than 16th century, I decided I couldn't use. Now, beneficial came up in Middle English. It was being used in 1400, 1300. So I could use it. It's great. So they could use that. It's absolutely fine. But other things, to parlay, they were going for a parlay, you know, chat amongst them. And I thought, was the parlay a word then? No, it didn't come into America in the 1800s. So I had to go back and use what the Middle English word was, which was paroli, which is the Italian word for talk. So it all makes sense at the end. So yeah, it took me so much time. And then I had to learn all about the armor, and I was starting to do a Knights in Armor course, which would have been great fun, but the lockdown came and stopped me. So I had to use all these diagrams. I used to do some fencing, but which helped. And I was practicing with my son, saying, if we struck like that with that word. So it was all this kind of, so tons. And I read all these books on what was going on between Henry IV and Henry V and all the politics. It took me ages. And I've got this big chart on the wall. My wife thinks it's hilarious because I've got goodies going down one side and baddies down there, because I have to use the real names of all the people that were around, apart from my characters. And yeah, with tons. And even now I think, who said that then? Did that timeline go? I have a big timeline of what happened. I have to keep going back to the page references. So it's constant research to make sure you got it right, because someone out there would say, no, you're a muppet. That didn't happen then. That happened 6 months earlier, or something like that. But you've got to be so careful, because the historical novel readers are a really picky lot, because they love their history. And so it's tons
like
of
the
research.
detail. I bet it was. So I found out during the course of my research on you that you like to rehearse the scenes and fire the weapons and get really involved in it.
Yeah, I do. I did everything I write about in my Deal series, which is what you're talking about.
We're not talking cannons and things.
No, not talking cannons yet. I say I would have done the weapons with the Knights in Armor, but yeah, going back to the Deal series. Every time I've got a number of people who really help me tremendously to get everything right. So I interviewed 3 SAS guys who were fabulous, because it isn't just a question of learning about the weapons they fire, but you have to get inside their head. You can't have an SAS character, for example, talking like a surveyor, and vice versa.
Yeah.
So you need to understand their mentality. So if they're bodyguarding, for example, and I remember asking this guy this, and I said, look, if you're bodyguarding and you're walking through the airport, I said, you know, and you see a pretty girl in a short skirt, you're going to get distracted and look over, or you're so focused on what you're doing that you forget the fact you're a bloke. And he said, no, we'll have a quick look and then get back to the job again. And so all the time I'm trying to get, and one of the things that came out was, they said, everyone knows the SAS motto is who dares wins. And he said, the other motto that we have is, how can we do it better? We're always trying to think, how can we do? And this helped tremendously, because it then impacted on the way the story went, believe it or not, because it made me think of, if they get to a hotel room, and we all go to a hotel room, it's got a flimsy lock on the door, 2 hinges. And he said, if we got to a hotel room, the first thing we'd do, and we were going to stay there, or an apartment, is put 4 hinges on and 2 locks, because it buys us 10, 30 seconds. And if someone tries to break in, it gives us time to grab a weapon or get out of the room. Things that you wouldn't normally think about. And other stuff like, yes, I fired the weapon. Now, when you hear Arnie or Bruce in a film and they fire a silenced rifle and they go, take that guy out there, and it's pss, pss, like this. Absolute rubbish. If you fire a silenced rifle, it sounds like someone, I won't do it because it might make everyone jump, but it sounds like someone clapping in your ear. There is no way, so I'm sorry it's ruined all the films for you, everyone watching, but there is no way a silenced rifle sounds pss, pss, like this. It sounds like bang, bang in your ear. Rubbish, I'm afraid. So that put that one out of the window. And the other thing I was very lucky with is, I've got a chap who, can't say his name, but he used to be the chief electronic surveillance officer for Special Branch. So I wanted to know, do things work? We all seen in Goldfinger and James Bond where he puts the little bug on the back of the car and he traces Goldfinger. I said, does this work? And he said, well, yes, the bug is this big. The trouble is, to power it for more than an hour, you need a ruddy great battery the size of a car battery, which rather defeats the object of it. So I said, well, how do you get right? So we had to explain all that. So everything that works in the book, and he told me how explosives work and how to blow up a car, not really, but how to set it so explosives will blow up a car properly, what you can and cannot do that actually works. So no one, hopefully, can look at the book and say, well, that's rubbish, that doesn't work. So everything has to work. And I check with everyone that does it to make sure that there are lots of other people. I also spoke to the former Rear Admiral who advised Maggie Thatcher on the Falklands invasion. And I said, well, how would you do this militarily? Because I wanted to know. And he said this, and then he said, but this is what you should do. And I said, that's brilliant. And it gave me the whole pivot point for my book. And I thought, yes, that'll work. He said, can't have my name in the book, though, because it's too clear. I said, okay, fine.
Yeah.
So it was good. It was good. So, yes, all those things. I fire all the weapons and do everything I possibly can and try and do everything from almost breaking and entering, which we might get onto later on, to try to do that kind of thing. And
I will come back to that.
Okay.
Absolutely. To my shame, I didn't learn about silenced weapons until I was already married to a soldier who found my naivety hilarious. He's not a soldier anymore, but I'm glad that conversation was at home and not in the pub.
I'm sure.
because it showed me up a tremendous amount.
It's surprising, isn't it? You take all these things for granted, and I'm sure your husband is saying, yeah, he's absolutely right. It's rubbish. And you see it in the films and it doesn't work, but yeah, you know all about it then.
We're going to go back to the stream for a question. Has anyone ever come back to you and said something wasn't accurate? It sounds like you put an awful. I'm sorry, I don't know which member that's from. It just comes up as Facebook user.
That's fine. The only thing that did come up, which will probably make you laugh, is that I have a beta reader. I have about 4 or 5 beta readers, and I give them my rough text. I think it's finished, so I'll give it to them and I'll take it on board. And she's only about in her 20s, this girl, but she's very good. And she came back to me, and I had these violent arguments in my head with her. I never argued with her, but I read it, that's rubbish. Anyway, she came back, and there was a scene which we've all seen in the films and everything, where someone puts a pad over someone's mouth and they say it's chloroform, and the person goes out in a number of seconds. And she put a note on there saying, if this is chloroform, it's rubbish, it doesn't work. And I thought, what do you mean? I'm a typical boy. I read James Bond and the Persuaders and the Saint and Harry Palmer and all these kind of. Of course it works. So I Googled, how long does chloroform take to act? And it came back as 3.5 minutes. Rubbish. All those films, again, are all completely wrong. And I'd have gone out and said this. So then I had to research what in ether form knocks a human out in matter of seconds. And it came back as, I can never pronounce this, metrahydrobroxil or something, which is the stuff they give to vets to put horses to sleep. And if it lands on the back of a human, just on the skin, it'll kill a human in undilated form in 30 seconds. They give it to vets in 1 to 500 dilution, and it'll knock a human out in dilution ether form in 3.5 seconds. And it's quite interesting because the guy I was telling you about was the special branch guy. He said, just think about this for a second, Glenn. He said, you Google explosives, how to kill people, poisons, he said, you will have a file at GCHQ. And at the moment, it'll be marked harmless. But one day, don't be surprised if you get a guy in a raincoat knocking at the door saying, back off, because you've got too close. And it sort of made me think, really, that could be a problem. But yeah, I got caught out there with that, luckily, before it got to print. So otherwise, I'd have been completely stupid and got it wrong.
I wonder how many people would have known that, though, or how many people would have just assumed.
Somebody would,
of course.
I'd be giving a talk somewhere, which is a broad audience, so you never know who's going to be doing it. And they'll say, even then, someone's caught me out and said, "Oh, that's wrong," and they'll say, "Are you sure that's right? I used the word tabard instead of lanyard," and they caught me out for that and said that. These tiny things that they get wrong. So hopefully, everything else is right on a technical point of view, anyway.
Well, with the vast amounts of research that you do, have there been any surprising things other than chloroform that you've learned?
Yeah, it was on the 4th book, Deal on Ice. This was a lot of fun, actually. I needed to. I had a baddie who's an MP who was corrupt. Yeah, I know. Don't go there. And I needed to. Yes.
No politics.
No politics.
Let's just do crime.
Exactly. And I needed him to be killed. Now, at the time, I'd found out that that Portcullis House had just been opened. So I needed my assassin to break in, kill the MP, get in undetected, commit the murder, make it like suicide, and get out again. So I thought, can this be done? Because you can't just make these things up. You have to know all about it. So I wrote to 2 MPs who just said, go away. No way we're going to help you.
Like we're going to tell you.
Exactly. Exactly. And then the 3rd MP said, yeah. And I thought, really?
Ooh.
And he said, yeah, you understand what I want to do? And he said, yeah. So I went down to meet him at Portcullis House, and I cased the joint as I did, just walking around independently. And there's a funny thing, because when you're a surveyor, the kind of surveyor I was, you lived on information and getting information from people. It was all it was like spying in a way, like secret dealing. And there's something that the special branch guy said that we do as the kind of surveyor I was, which we didn't have a name for, and it's called mosaic questioning. And basically, it works like this. If someone's in a group and I wanted to find out about you, Sam, I'd go and say, oh, hi, are you Cynthia? And you say, no, my name's Sam. Oh, sorry, I thought you were Cynthia. And you'd say, no, I'm Sam, da, 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 da. And I said, right. And I go to the person next door to you, and then I'd say, oh, you know Sam there, she lives at 43 Western Avenue. No, she doesn't. She lives at... By the time you've been around the whole room, I know your inside leg measurement, where you went to school, and I built up a complete profile of you. So there's this poor guy with a Kango outside, and he stopped to have a fag, and I had a chat with him. And by the time I'd finished, I knew how to get his job, I even took a picture of him with his lanyard hanging down the front. I knew where he worked, how the van did. So that was one way I found to get in. And one thing he said to me was, once you're in, and nobody says anything, because it's assumed that you're part of the fabric.
Right.
So then I went into the reception area, and you go through this airport security, and it's all really fancy. And you get given a lanyard, and the lanyard is just like the ones, not visitor's lanyard. The only difference is on the card. So it's the same band going down there. And bearing in mind, I looked the part. I was dressed in a suit and a tie. I looked the part. So I went in, and then you get left in this holding area, and you wait for SPAD to come along from the MP. And I thought, well, I wonder where you go to the loo then, because my mind's all twisted. It's always trying to think of ways to do things. And so I said, can I use the loo? And they said, I didn't need to. And I said, yeah, wait. And they let me through these glass doors, and you go up this staircase, which is all boxed in, and the main area is down below, but you can't get over because it's got perspex around. Get to the top, corridor, and there's this bored person at the top going like this, loo over there. Couldn't care. Get to the loo. And I went in, and people were talking secrets while they were on the loo for a start. And I was thinking, oh, this is quite interesting. Another idea whizzing in my mind. And then in the corner of each, it's set in a quadrangle. In the corner, there are the doors, electronic doors that lead to the stairs and the lifts. Once you get into that area, you're into the whole building. And I did this thing, and that's a funny thing. If you walk around a building with a piece of paper wrapped like this, folded in half, anywhere, people think you belong. You just walk as though you belong. You fold the paper. So I went along, and I saw people coming in, and I thought, I can do this. So I folded the paper, got my phone out, pretended to have a conversation on there, and I waited till the next person came to unlock from the inside. I said, and we've all done it. Hold the phone. And they let me in. And I was in to the whole building. And I thought, oh, I can't stop here. I've got to try this. So then went up the stairs along a corridor and said, I just knocked on the door and said, oh, I'm looking for the Min of Ag and Fish. And they said, oh, no, it's up the next floor, dear. Your first day. And I said, yeah, and carried on. And I thought, that's it. That's how you do it. That's how you get in. Anyway, so I went back down and waited for the guy to arrive. And I just thought, this is fantastic. I've cracked it. I've got in. And then there's an underground tunnel between there and the main Houses of Parliament, which they call the Palace rather than Westminster Palace or House of Parliament. And I said, can I walk down there? Because once you go in, it's where the terrorists came in and attacked Michael Fallon, and you can walk from one side to the other. And all I saw was rent-a-cop around, no real police, just a couple of security guards bored out of their mind, because once you're in, you're in. No one notices you. And I say, I was dressed properly. I had the lanyard, my tie covering the bit of the lanyard, had the right green and colours, no problem. So I said, I kind of walked down. So I had my briefcase, I was walking along, and I thought, I'm going to get stopped any minute. I said, don't come with me, walk behind me, just to pull me out in case I get stopped. I walked down, and I was straight into the House of Parliament. No one said a word. I thought, oh, this is brilliant. So then I turned around and came back again. And I thought, I'm going to get stopped here, because if once you go on a tour, you're not booked in on a tour. And when you leave the building, all they say when you take your lanyard off is, please put your lanyard on this peg when you leave. You're not signed out. You're not signed in. You can do anything you want. For me, with my twisted agent's writer's mind, it was just manna from heaven. And I thought, fantastic. So then I walked straight up the escalator back into there. Done. I was in. So that's 2 ways. And I worked all this into the book. So yeah, so it does get a little bit tricky. And someone said to me, ever been arrested? And I said, not yet, but it's probably got it quite close. So
you might be keeping a close eye on you now with your
well, I'll be
internet
getting that
history
knock
and
on the
your
door. Yes,
knowledge
exactly.
of breaking into the Houses of Parliament. You might
But
get that man in a raincoat.
Well, it's quite interesting, because the Spade was taking me round. They knew exactly what I was doing. And they said, I said, look, playing devil's advocate here. I said, why are you helping me? And he said, because security is like a leaky sieve, and we want you to write this book, and we want you to highlight these things. And that's not the first time. The other book, which is this one, which is Deal with the Devil.
Yeah.
I needed to find out about drug smuggling. So I went, and I didn't know how a drugs bus went in the Channel. I mean, who knows how a drugs bus goes down in the Channel?
Your
So I
poor
wrote,
wife must be in bits whenever you leave the house.
she says, where are you going today? And I said, well, I'm going to see if I can break into the Kremlin. I'll tell you a story about that in a minute. We went, so I wrote to the Inland Revenue, and they, unsurprisingly, wouldn't help me. I wrote to the Navy, and they wouldn't help me. But then I wrote to the Marine Police at Hamble. And I said, look, I'm a bit of a mad author. Will you take me, show me how a drugs bus works in the Channel, because I need to know that. And they said, yeah. I thought, oh. So I went down to the boat, and they took me out on the boat and showed me. And they have 2 boats with a ribbon on one side. And I was just so excited. I'm just like a 6-year-old in a sweet shop. And they brought me back, and they said, so what are you trying to do? And I won't ruin the story, but I explained what I was trying to do.
Yeah.
And they said, will it work? And I said, well, I think it'll work, but I don't know, because the drug squad won't talk to me. Surprise, surprise. He said, hang on a second. So he dials his mate in the drug squad while I'm there. And they said, we've got this nutty author here who's proposing this theory on drug smuggling to do with polo. And he wants to know if it'll work. And there was silence on the end of the phone. I was thinking, oh shit, I'm about to be arrested. And then he said, my mate's really unhappy with you. And I said, why? He said, because what you're proposing will work. No one's done it. And when your book comes out, it'll be a template for how to do it in real life. And they said, right, we want a piece of this polo equipment, and we want a copy of your book when it's published, so we can see exactly what you're doing and how you're trying to do it. As an author, I was going, yes, brilliant. No one's ever done this, and it works. And the police are really upset, which is great, because it means that I've got it right. So, it's good.
Before we go to some more member questions, I can see lining up at the side, I've just noted down the word Kremlin on my notebook so I wouldn't forget to ask you.
Oh, Kremlin, right, yeah. Well, when you go to Russia, even as a tourist, not as a spy, you need to, of course, because my wife said before we went, because she came with me, she's coming with me, obviously, because it was a celebration. Apart from research, it was my 60th and our meaningful wedding anniversary, 25 years. And she said, so she go, right, if you go, you do not tell people you're an author. You do not tell people that you're writing a thriller and this kind of thing. Now, there are 2 people in the world that fascinate me. I wouldn't like them, but as characters, I find them absolutely fascinating as political figures. And one of them is Putin. Love him or hate him, he is an enigmatic character. And I really wanted to meet him. Now, there are 2 things that Putin loves that I know quite a lot about. And if you try and get him on these 2 subjects, which is judo and horses, he will talk to you. And you can apply to meet him through the people that I got the visa from, which is the long process. And they started to set up this process. And I was halfway along there. And my wife bottled this at the last minute and said, if you go meet Putin, I won't come with you. So I had this choice: Putin, my wife, Putin. No, so I had to. And the other thing is, the guy who was the surveillance chap, a special branch, knew what I was trying to do. And he said, if you meet Putin, I can have no more contact with you. I can't talk to you on Facebook. I can't see you ever again,
Yeah.
because of the compromise on that. It's that serious. It was
Yeah.
I was really disappointed, because I loved to have met him, and I was halfway along my application was being processed, and I know if you get Putin on those two subjects, he's a really affable guy, because he loves to talk about horses and judo. So, it's quite interesting, really. But I didn't, and my wife came with me, and all's well. So it's okay.
So everyone's still friends. That's
Everyone's
good.
still friends. Exactly. So there we are.
We've got a question from Caroline. You had
Yes.
some royal signals in your deal novels. Did you chat to them too? My dad was one of them. Did you say that they didn't talk to you, the royal signals?
I didn't talk to the royal signals. I talked to the SAS guys, and I talked. What she's thinking of is she's thinking of the 14th int, which is the 14. I've got to get this right, because they don't call it int. It is 14. They call it 14 int rather than 14th, like we'd all say it. The 14th int are the intelligence arm that run side by side with the SAS. They're the intelligence people that feed them there, and they're sort of trained in a lot of the same way to go undercover and feed through. They're a very secretive organization, and I learned all about them from a number of sources, including the SAS guy. And when I was taken around the Foreign Office, which I was, because I wanted to see how that worked, which is another story you can bring up if you like, the guy put me in contact with a Royal Marine Commando. And it was the friend of the father. So he knew me. And whenever you make a call like this or a contact, there's 2 weeks when nothing happens and all your background's being checked. Little ticks. Your friends have said, I had this guy and so and so. And you find your bank accounts, all these. And after 2 weeks, they clear you and then they'll talk to you. So this guy phoned me up, and he wouldn't tell me exactly what he used to do in the military. Part of it was Royal Marine Commando. I think part of it was 14 int. And he put the phone down on me halfway through. He said, where'd you get that idea from? What do you do? Who told you that? And I said, no one. It's just my weird imagination. I said, and when someone puts the phone down, you think, fab, because you've cracked it. You're getting really close to the bone, and whatever you're deciding to do is probably nearly happened. So it's good.
We've got another comment from Caroline, and it says, I'm a science teacher and have a love of pyrotechnics. I'm fairly sure I'm on a watch list for my Amazon purchases. It's something that comes up a lot, with the admins and the members, the author members in particular.
Yeah.
Everyone's terrified of the search history coming up.
Yeah. my search history would be a nightmare. It really would. I mean, it's just even security systems and this kind of thing, and how to break in, and the guns and the breakdown. I don't write military novels, but everything I write, I stress that it's never a military novel, but there are elements to it that have to be right. In the same way, a lot of spy stories, I'll read them and I'll say, they'll describe a gun and they don't describe the gun, and I think, that's wrong. It wouldn't do that. Or you can't be shot 5 times and jump back up because it hurts. There was my cousin is an army doctor. She works for the military. She's in one of the armed forces. And I asked her about gunshot wounds and how you treat them, because I needed to get that right. And she said, oh, well, yeah, we treat them like this. We put compression pads on. And then she said that if we can't find sterile fluids in the field, we use Coca-Cola. And I said, Coca-Cola? And she said, yeah, it's full of sugar. It's completely sterile. It goes straight into the bloodstream and it gets you right. I said, no, you couldn't make that up, but they actually do this.
I have never heard that.
No, and it works. Apparently, I wouldn't want to try it, but apparently it works, and Coca-Cola works every time. It's absolutely perfect. And the other thing she said was that she went to an emergency in the middle of Brecon Beacons. 2 of the SAS guys have been abseiling out of helicopters, and one of them had come down into a tree and broken his leg in 2 places. She was rushed across there to sort him out. And she said the other thing is they have another acronym, which is VAA. I said, what's VAA? Valuable and attractive. And whenever they're on missions and they like something, they just snaffle it because they love it. And so she got there expecting this guy to be in agony. She got there and he went, "Hi, Doc." She said, "What have you done?" And when they go on missions, they're only given these then. They have morphine pens and they'd snaffled them. His mate had got one, he'd got one. And by the time they got there, he was in agony. So he'd got 2 full morphine pens in his leg and he was absolutely as high as a kite. Couldn't feel a bloody thing because he just, and it's all right, Dr. Burns was gone. And these things really happen. And I thought, right, that's going into the book. Yeah, we'll have a bit of that. Thank you.
That's genius.
It's just great. So it sort of
you can just picture it though, can't you? It's just that's so vivid in your mind.
Yeah, he couldn't. Yeah, leg bent somewhere around his neck, and that's all right. Don't no worry about it. Perfectly all right.
Fine, be fine.
It's fine.
I wanted to ask you about what made you decide to become a writer, and where did Rupert Brett come from? Where was the idea from? Have you always known you wanted to write? So obviously you've had a long career before that.
Yeah. I was a commercial property surveyor. One of my former bosses said to me one time in the career, he said, "Forget about all that nonsense." He said, "What we really are is wordsmiths." And I thought, what the hell's he talking about? And the further I got into my career, the more I realized exactly what he was talking about. And my wife, bless her, pushed me because I wouldn't be here if she hadn't done it. She said, "Look, you're always saying what if, or how could I break into that building, or da 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 da." And yeah, well, the kind of surveyor I was that I used to try and do deals off market. And so in order to do that, we wouldn't get given any information. So I used to have to break into buildings legitimately, not get caught and get back out, having looked inside, often take a client in. And I did that. And my best blag was in Birmingham, where I got in with a 3-point alert when the terrorism strikes were on there, and they were all government things. I got into the building, saw the empty space, and got back out without being caught. Brilliant. But the point of that is that my wife kept pushing me to do this. And because I kept thinking about these little stories and how someone could do that, when we came back from Italy, she said, "You've got to write the story," because Italy inspired me to put the Italian half of the book together. And so I started doing that, and I needed a hero. And a lot of people in commercial property called Rupert. It's nowhere near my name. And I always like Brett off Brett Sinclair from The Persuaders. Yeah, I know it shows my age again. But so I just put the two together. And the actual character was inspired by 2 or 3 people who I knew who are real surveyors. And it's another funny fact that a lot of the surveyors in the West End, I don't know why, are members of the TA. About 6 or 7 of them just in my area that I knew, and you'd say, "Oh yeah, so and so." There's 2 London regiments, excuse me, and a lot of them are members of this London regiment. I don't know why it attracts surveyors; it just does. So they're sort of weekend warriors, and so I thought that's great. I can have Rupert, which then gives him some basic survival knowledge legitimately. And he's signed the Official Secrets Act, so it helps him there. So it gives him some pizzazz, really, and this isn't too far a stretch from the truth. So yeah, he's an amalgam of 3 people that I knew and put together to form Rupert.
We've got you made a point before. You said about the Foreign Office, and you said we'll come back to that. So I'm going to come back to the Foreign Office.
Yeah, the Foreign Office. The Foreign Office was great fun because I heard, I wasn't sure if it was true, that when the government wants to spy, probably all kinds of people knocking on my door now. When the government wants to spy
too many raincoats.
Exactly, too many raincoats. Hello, you've broken this one. They actually, and there are documented facts of this happening, so I'm not taking it off too far. They will send people abroad in their normal. So if you're an accountant or a lawyer or a nurse, and you're going to somewhere, people will come along and they'll say, "While you're there, could you just keep an eye, and you don't need to spy, you don't need to break into anything, but da 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 da." Now, if it gets a bit more dangerous and they're a bit concerned about it, say like in Argentina when it was very dodgy at the time that my hero was there, they will attach an SAS guy to you as a bodyguard. And this is attached by the Foreign Office. And what happens is that the SAS have a very best of the best of the best. So they're already fabulous, and it's called the increment or the K section, and they are sort of locked in the basement, break glass when you need to remove them, and they attach. And what happens is that whoever it is, because the SAS are really intelligent and they're not just thugs with guns, and they look the part and they can merge in. And what they do is they attach someone. So if they want to become a surveyor, they will attach an SAS guy with the increment section to me, and he will shadow me for 2 weeks to wear the suit the right way, talk. We've all got little buzzwords in our that we use, little acronyms, to learn all those things and put the veneer on him of being a surveyor. So he then goes along ostensibly as a surveyor, baby surveyor, as the bag carrier. In reality, he's he's the bodyguard for the real surveyors out there doing the deals in case something goes wrong. Hence my partnership between Rupert Brett and Chris Adams as it came along, so that it all actually works together. So when I went round the Foreign Office, the guy was showing me around, showing the room when they're waiting. He showed me the procedures of how it would work. He showed me who would be at the meeting, what people of what forces would be there when they're dragging the poor devil in. Restart your computer. Sorry, my computer's come to say restart later. Don't do it now.
Not right now.
Again? Not right now. Am I back again? Please say I'm back. Can you still hear me?
You didn't disappear from me.
Oh, fantastic. Good. It all went blank in my end. I said, oh no. And so he showed me and told me who was there and took me around the Foreign Office. And it was great because when I described Rupert going there to be briefed, it meant that I got a perfect picture of what it looked like and the procedures of going in and who would be there. And he showed me the room where foreign officials who've been naughty boys have gone in, and they get kept waiting by the foreign minister if they've upset HM government. And there's a clock ticking on the wall that is really irritating if you're there for a long time. So we do that to put them on. All these tiny details that get fed into the story to give it verisimilitude and make sure that everything I'm saying actually works.
Claire, Rupert's wife, is she based on anyone?
There's a little bit of my wife in there,
which is obviously what I'm getting at.
Yeah, there is a bit of my wife. I sort of had her in my mind. There are a couple of people. I mean, looks wise, I say in one of the books that later on that she looks a bit like Renee Russo in her very early days, because obviously she's only in her 20s. But contemporarily, she looks in my mind a bit like two actresses who, if I had to say who was going to play them, whoever made it a film. One is Charity Wakefield, and the other one, I can never pronounce the name, is Romola Garai, who they sort of typify how I imagine Claire looking. But you have to bear in mind that in the 80s, there were and there still are really, much more so now, but there were very, very few female surveyors. It was I remember in our course at uni, out of the whole year, there were 2 female surveyors. That's all training to be, and I think one of them was going into fine arts and chattels rather than commercial. So it's probably 98% male. It was one of the last sort of bastions of male dominance, particularly then. And it was a very sort of, boys together kind of environment where the girls either had to use their sexuality like Claire does, or try and become very hard-nosed than one of the boys, which never really went off very well. So it's so she's sort of there, but the sort of my wife's voice is in my background when I'm saying what she'd probably say. I suppose you can't help in doing that and incorporating things in, really.
During lockdown, obviously new for all of us, have you spent a lot more time together, or how has your working day been affected?
well, as an author, to be honest, I've dare I say this, apart from one point, I've thoroughly enjoyed lockdown because as an author, I get up, I run, walk the dogs, come back, write all day, see no one, eat. My wife sometimes is at home in the afternoons. That's all I see. Write some more, sleep, repeat. And
it's not really changed for you.
No, and it's fabulous because every time I used to go out, I could walk down the roads around that no one had ever run me over because there were no cars around. It was, I hate to say this because it's horrible, but from me, it's been wonderful because it hasn't really changed anything. It's made life easy, and I'm managing to do easily 1,000 words a day, which is good. You know, sometimes
great, yeah.
sometimes 2,500, because things don't get in the way, and because you can't do anything else, any other hobbies and things. It means that you know, I'm just writing, which is good, and doing all my research, which is, yeah, takes its
We've
time.
got another question from Caroline Maston.
Oh yeah.
She wants to know how you found a course to be a knight, because it sounds fun.
Well, there are two kinds of, apparently, I didn't know this. There are two kinds of medieval knights floating around. Two different kinds of groups.
Okay.
One is the those with armor, which you see in the reenactment groups, where they beat 7 bells out of each other. So I googled reenactment groups, and I said, "Look,
Big file,
exact huge file,
huge."
and I phoned them up and I said, "Look, like I usually do, I'm an author. I'm writing a medieval novel. I want to know what it feels like to bash someone over the head with a sword. I want to know what it feels like to be hit with a sword, and all kinds of things where I've heard that if you're completely untrained, that you're actually more dangerous than you are if you're not trained for the first couple of moves." Because you fight in a completely unorthodox way. So I said, what I want to do is see if I can just go in with no training, you pad up, and see if I can get through your guard and whack you. And they thought this was hilarious. And so they said, yeah, great, come along. This is just before lockdown came, so I haven't actually done that. And then the other group is a group called HEMAS, HEMAS, which is the Historical Enactment Martial Arts Society.
Okay.
Now, this is based upon one of the main writers and perfectionists in swordplay called Fiori da Liberi. And his treatise is now in the Getty Museum, and he's acknowledged as being the master of the sword. And he lived, bless him, at exactly the same time that my book's written. In fact, he died in the year my book starts, so it's all that kind of period. And he only took certain people in to train, but he wrote and he did these lovely plates and pictures. And he must actually follow his teachings and his treatise on all these things. And again, I googled local HEMAS people, and they said, "Yeah, you can come along. We can have a bit of fight. You can," and they fight without armor, so it's the pure beauty of the sword and all the moves. So it's not like Hollywood where they're going dung 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 dung. It doesn't work like that. So I've got lots of books on him. So that's how I got hold of them. So I phoned both of them up and said, "Can I come along?" And they said, "Yeah, if you put the acknowledgements in the front of your book that you've helped us." So yeah, it's fine by me, no problem at all. So I've got that invitation when we can get back to meeting socially again to actually do that and actually have a go. So I might be changing a couple of the scenes according to what I find out, but it's not quite. So that's how I found them, just by googling that, really, and getting hold of them.
So, as an author, do you have any bits that you find easier or trickier of the whole process? Do you do your own marketing as well?
I do everything. The marketing I hate. I loathe the marketing. I love the research for obvious reasons because I have a lot of fun doing it. I actually love the writing. And there are certain bits in the writing where I'm going like this, and then suddenly I'll gallop up because it's a really exciting bit that I've held in my head for 2 years, and I know it's coming, and I can't wait to get to that point. And when I do, I gallop into it and really get really excited by it, and I write those bits. And other bits where there are some dialogue, particularly in the latest one, where I've got to get the dialogue right, particularly with Sir Richard Whittington and Jamie de Grisbert, and I've got to really get the meaning across without sounding like modern speech. That's quite hard. The marketing, as I say, I loathe because it's not something I enjoy really. I've had to get better at it. I've had to understand it, but it's not natural for me. And all I want to do is write, really,
Yeah.
and
explore.
And explore, write and explore. I'm a happy bunny if I can do that, but yeah. Unfortunately, it's got to be done. I have formatters so that when I give some of the bad jobs away, which you can do yourself as an author, but I'm hopeless, so I can't do it. When I have obviously a proofreader and developmental editor, I've got a really good guy I've just found is doing my 1410 for me. He's just stunning. And then when that's done, because I write in Word, I then have to give it to a graphic designer who's a brilliant lady, and she puts it all into the right format to go into Amazon and printing sources, and then she also changes it for me to go into Kindle and ebooks, so it all reads the right way. Otherwise you get lines going here and paragraphs off there and it all goes wrong. And and then I've got a great group of guys who do the cover designs for me.
That was my next question.
So they're just really, I love them to bits, because my first two covers I did with Create Space that became Amazon, and they did it for me, and I sort of helped them along, and I was disappointed in them, and I've just commissioned these chaps to redo my first book, which is being re-edited and re-proofread, so you can't get it at the moment, but there's a brand new cover coming, and I saw this cover and I thought, I love it to bits. They're so clever. You just give them a few ideas and they run with it, and they come back with this wonderful thing, and I just think it's great.
So you've done all your research and you're getting ready to write your book. Where do you begin? Do you have a completely full detailed plan, or
no? It's all in here. It's all in here. I don't. My wife thinks I'm a bit mad, but I don't write anything down until I got to this book. And the only reason I had to in this book is because there are so many real people that I needed to have in the right time. Yeah, exactly. I remember all the goodies, all the baddies, because I've got 2 lines vertical with about 6 A4 sheets of paper all taped together, all up on my wall. I have to keep spinning around and going like this and seeing what hangs there. But no, it's all, and I actually start writing the next book in my head while I'm still writing the current one. So it's
you've got a lot going on in your head.
Yeah, I know. I mean, sometimes, and this again, my poor wife suffers, because I have a little book by the side of my bed, and I've learned that a piece of dialogue will come to me in the night. Sometimes I'll wake up and I think, oh, that's great. So it'll be like, he said so and so. I think you ought to go to. And I've learned by experience that if I try and remember that in the morning, I'll have forgotten it. So I sort of sneak out the bed in the middle of the night, take my book, hand write all these notes down there. Get them, oh, yes, it's all there. And so that's the only thing I do in terms of planning, that sometimes a piece of dialogue will come to me, and I've just got to write it down at that point, or a description of the sea or clouds or, I don't know, anything really. So it all goes like that.
Dying to know, we've not got long left. The hours flow. We've got about 8 minutes left.
Okay.
It has gone really fast. So in a couple of minutes, I'm going to ask you to recap your book covers for us.
Okay.
So people know what they're looking for, can find you easily. What kind of things have you been reading lately? Do you go for one genre? Do you read widely?
I read across all genres. So obviously, Fleming and early Dick Francis are my heroes. I read, dare I say it, Western books as well, but one particular author, Louis L'Amour, who is just, and his one book I read every year in the winter, because the descriptions, and he's the chap who went and visited everything, has such a big influence on the way I write. And this one particular book, Hella with a Gun, is just brilliant. I love it to bits. I read, dare I say it, Regency romance as well. I read a lot of Georgette Hare because I love her characterization. I love her stories. They're just great. And I'm a romantic at heart, so I can't help it really. I read a lot of crime and thrillers, all kinds of people, from Baldacci through to Lee Child, and a lot of the old English crime club classics, the British Library crime club classics. I love those because they don't rely upon technology. It's very sort of an intellectual thing. So the detective has to crack it without finding that, like Abby does in CSI, she puts it on the computer and it tells you exactly what happened when. So there's none of that going on. And I read a lot of historical fiction. So my favorites are Anthony Rich's Bernard Cornwell and Christian Cameron, and Sharon Penman. Those 4 authors, I think, lead the field. Christian Cameron is just amazing. And Anthony Rich is for the Roman period. For me, I know a lot of people out there doing it. For me, he's the best Roman period author. His characterization and his settings are just second to none, and descriptions, they're really, really good. But quite a broad range really of books that I read across. And I've read all the Samson books, obviously, and I'm trying to think of all the other ones I've read really. But yeah, all kinds of things across the board.
You've talked a bit about the fifth deal book and that
Yeah,
there's going to be 5 books in your new series.
yeah,
You also hinted at there being something floating around in the back of your mind for something else. That's something you want
yeah.
to talk about yet, or?
Yeah, I can talk about it because I'm actually writing that at the same time that I'm writing my 1410 book because it's a bit of light relief. It's it's this, and I stress the semi here before I say a word. Semi autobiographical. It's a coming of age. It's only going to be a novella. It'll only be about 40,000 words. It's a novella, coming of age novella set in the very early 70s of a teenager growing up in Worcester and growing up and being influenced by the Northern Soul scene and everything that was going on there. From, I know I can see you smiling because you and Lucy are having a grin at this, and it's influenced by the Northern Soul scene and the teenager identity because it was very tribal then with the gangs and what you wore, the whole influences, the attitudes. I have to be careful and put a warning at the front because I'm not toning it down. There was everything we said exactly what we thought then, so you have to be very careful and warn people that I'm not making it politically correct because it wasn't. So it was just how it was, and we all seem to get along okay. And anyway, and so it's all about that, and then him getting influenced and finding the music and finding his identity, which so many teenagers struggle with, and the clothes and everything else, and the groups and the gangs he went around with, and then finding Northern Soul and going dancing, and then losing it, and then coming back and later years, and then refining it again. It's going to be called Soul Redemption. But it's a lot of fun to write because I'm dredging my memory back about 5 million years when I was that teenager, and it's really good. I'm enjoying it, but it's almost like light relief. You know, when you read a heavy book, and then you've got another book there which sort of easy reading, and you sort of read that while you're reading that one, and it's a bit like that really when you're writing.
I've got one final question for you before we wrap up, and it's about, you've obviously written things for lots of different countries, all the countries that you visited.
Yeah.
How hard is it to get the details of the laws in different places right?
Well, everywhere I've written about, I have interviewed local surveyors because you're right, it is hard because the different rules and regulations. So I actually worked in Italy, so I understood the rules there, that's fine. But I interviewed a couple of surveyors for Argentina to find out the rules there, which were paramount and pivotal to what I was trying to do for money laundering. I then interviewed some people, surveyors in they don't call them surveyors there, but surveyors in America that were involved from England and America at the time my book was written in 94, 95. And then with Russia, I had to go back to how it started because we really did open an office in 1999. And I then talked to 4 different surveyors who were both as principals and surveyors on there, and asked them how it all worked, what their thoughts were, how the deals were done, what the markets were like, did you have 2 lots of information, one in Russian, one in English? Do you have translators? All these things had to be done so I could understand the mythology to just draw it round the back and see if I could get money out and did it work, and with the money laundering, all this kind of stuff really. So it was that's how I work it all out. So I speak to people who are actually on the ground. The 80s stuff was easy for me because that was my time. But as soon as you go abroad, you've got to really understand what it goes on so that you can make it work.
I mean, the whole thing, the amount of research, the detail, the stories that you've told us tonight, I've absolutely loved listening. I don't think I'd be as brave. I think I need to calm down a bit and actually just try some things and just see how I get on. I feel like I'd be the one that'd be hauled off in handcuffs, though. I'd look too nervous and too shifty.
As long as you promise to come visit me in prison one day, I'll be very happy. It'll be fine.
As long as you promise to return the favour when I'm hauled off.
I'll come and break you out. Don't worry. I'll sneak in there. And
Do you know what? I actually believe you could. I'll have you on speed dial right after the husband.
Excellent.
Can you give us one final recap of your deal books, please?
Yeah. Okay. Now I haven't got the first one because it's going to be a different picture. So the first one is No Deals Done. till it's done, which is what we used to say at the time in the 80s. And that is set in the 80s in London and Italy. And I'm having that redone with a new cover, which will be up on my website by the end of June. Very, very close, but not quite ready yet. This one is, this is A Deal Too Far. Let me get the shadow off there. That's it, Deal Too Far. That is the second one in the series, set in Argentina and the Falklands. It's hard doing it back to front. And London, Paraguay, Buenos Aires, Chile, and America at Boston. That's Rupert when he meets the SAS guy, goes as the bodyguard. Then I'm speeding along because we're running out of time. So this one is, get the shadow up there, A Deal with the Devil. This is the one on the police boat, and you can see the police boat there, which is what I actually went on, which is great fun. And this involves, this is 94, 95. This is Deauville, London, Northern Ireland, Florida, and Colombia. And this involves drug smuggling, polo, and the start of the subprime madness and all that kind of thing. And then this one is Mr. Putin. This is A Deal on Ice, which is London. This is when I broke into I didn't break in, nearly broke in, officer, if you're listening, to the portcullis house, and set around the time when immigration was relaxed and had the oligarchs, corruption, Putin sorting them out, cross-referencing, and it's really good fun to write. A lot of spying and double dealing and things like that, which is great. And then finally, and I've actually because we haven't got the book yet, so I've just taped it to the cover of an old book. There we are. So that's what the cover will look like by my great chaps who do the cover for me. The rest of the book doesn't exist yet because it's not ready, but that is the finished cover. So that's A Night in the Spy 1410, and each book thereafter will have 1411, 1412, 1415, roughly the same, slightly different background, but essentially it'll be the same character running all the way through. And then Soul Redemption, I'm hoping to get that out later this year, but again it'll be it'll be up on my website, and I'll be up on Amazon when it's actually ready to go.
It has been fantastic talking to you. I could sit here all evening listening to you.
Thank you. Really I've enjoyed it tremendously. It's been really good fun, actually. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us, and hopefully you'll come back when you've got some new releases so I can grill you some more and see what trouble you've been getting yourself into.
Yeah, I know. I might be from bars going down the front in prison, but no, thank you very much. It's been good fun. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.